Damien, I'm going to lead off with you here. I'm going to talk about Nick Suzuki shortly, but first, I want to ask you about Linus Ullmark. Obviously, 4 goals against is not a banner game, but how are you feeling just watching him after the preseason and the first couple of games after the last stretch of non-Craig Anderson Ottawa Senators goaltending?
Yeah, the one thing I will say is that it just seems more consistent compared to years past. Like if I compare him to Corpusalo had that ability to make that star-studded save last season, in the 1 year he was on the Sens, and made some crazy acrobatic saves. I think he was not bad athletically, but as he's been exposed so far this year in his one game, I think people really saw that his puck tracking ability wasn't very good. Now, as a player myself, I'm not super knowledgeable on goaltenders, just because goalies are a different breed, right? But I feel like the puck, it's pretty simple to say, but the puck just hits Allmark. Um, and his performance against the Florida Panthers was very, very good. Of course, as we know, I think he put 30 saves up in 30 saves up in 31 shots. Tonight, it just seems like compared to a lot of the Sens, he didn't have it. However, there was a lot more high danger opportunities given to the Habs. And Olmark, you know what? He didn't stand on his head like it did in the home opener. Sorry. Um, so not a terrible performance from him tonight. I will not put the loss on him. Um, but it's good that he signed that nice little extension as well. And I'm pretty confident, I will say, in this goaltender, especially for the next 5 seasons now.
Yeah, I think what you mentioned, the pucks just seem to hit him. That's really the sign of a good goaltender modern times. So much of it is about positioning, being in the right, like anticipating the play, getting there before the puck does, and having it like hit in your chest and drop down into your glove or your pads. Carey Price was like that. I remember just being astounded at how often he was either ahead of the play or just there just at the right perfect time. It's the kind of thing that separates a good goaltender from a great one, is that positioning, the anticipation, feeling where the puck is going. And Montembeault is an interesting one. We'll talk about him in a second, but he kind of doesn't have that. He's just like a pure battler. He's getting it a little bit more. He's more composed. He's kind of like a little bit more flaily, a little bit more like Marc-Andre Fleury esque, which is, I'm sure, why Maxime, who's in the chat, loves him. But there's lots to love about him as well. And, Allmark, that calm feeling that you get as a player when a goalie isn't going to mess things up for you every night, it hits different, I would say. I'm Andrew Berkshire from Game Over Montreal. I'm here with Damian Smith from Game Over Ottawa. If you're just joining us now, we have talked about Lane Hutson. We've talked about the fact that Ottawa did not bring their best game tonight. Linus Ullmark being a big, nice boost for the Ottawa Senators in general. If you like this show, please smash that like button. Please subscribe to Game Over Montreal. I've been really overwhelmed so far by both the number of people that we've had on the streams with the number of subscribers we have, and also the number of subscribers that have gone up on this channel without any marketing. Really, we've just been throwing things up on social media and hoping for the best. Obviously, amazing work by our team, but still, I'm very, very happy and very overwhelmed by the love in the chat for what we're trying to do here. I think we're going to do something really cool, and it's going to be really special. And speaking of special, finally, Nick Suzuki showed up this season. The first 2 games were very odd. Suzuki's so consistent in his execution and his effort. It just wasn't really there the first 2 games, but in this one, very early in the game, I started to see a couple little clever Suzuki plays that he always makes when he's on his game. It's stuff like somebody's attacking him on the boards, and instead of putting the puck up the boards, he protects with his back, and then at the exact perfect time sends a puck right through the opposing skater's skates to a player who's coming right in the slot there in the lane, off in Caulfield, because they have a lot of chemistry. But I was really happy to see Nick Suzuki take a step today, and based on the metrics, he actually led the Canadiens with 86% expected goals for while he was on ice, which is pretty darn good considering the Senators dominated that metric most of the game and finished at 57% control. Suzuki was also at 78% of the shots in favor of the Canadiens while he was on the ice. It's been a big change to watch that happen for him and start to catch up to Slavkovsky and Caulfield, who have started the season pretty well. I've seen a lot of people kind of going after Slav for his performance in Boston, but I honestly think the first two games, as a Nick Suzuki booster, he's right behind me. I don't know if I went over my correct shoulder there. He wasn't good. He wasn't good the first couple of games. It was below standard for Nick Suzuki. Now this is the standard, and I'm excited to see where he goes with it.
I'm sorry, bad timing there to take a sip of water.
No worries.
Nick's is, yeah. I mean, this is looking at his game log here. It's sort of a classic Suzuki game, you know. Puts up a point, an assist there, +2, over 19 minutes of ice, and a takeaway. As outsiders, we are known how good defensively Suzuki is, especially 5-on-5 and 65% in the faceoff die. I believe that's 13 for 20 tonight. And a very tidy piece of business on a Saturday night. So that's a good performance from him, and we'll see if he can keep it up. And yeah, like, he's a team you want. He's a player you want on your team every single day of the week. I'm jealous that you guys got him for Pacioretty for sure. The one thing I will say is, like, going forward, I know this is big picture and everything. Is he a legit number one center in this league? A player who can put up 90 points, who has that upside? Because we know he has the two-way ability. But when you look at a lot of winning teams who have won the Stanley Cup, pretty much every single one of them has a legit first-line center, star, like superstar player. And, of course, I think Suzuki is a star. However, does he have another gear going forward? He is 25 years of age, I believe. So he's just entering his prime, right? And we know he's a very, very, very smart player. Let's just see if he can get to that little extra level going forward. And, you know, has a good performance tonight. We'll see if he continues that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like that's a common question for the Canadiens rebuild, right? And it's something I think Canadiens fans think about a lot, is like, they're now coming out of this rebuild. Have they done enough? Do they have the elite talent to elevate to a cup contender? And, you know, obviously a lot of it is going to depend on how different players pan out. You know, we've seen Lane Hutson for a few games now. If this is what Lane Hutson is, a lot of questions are answered about the defense. You know, even without David Reinbacher in the NHL yet, he's out 5 to 6 months with that knee injury. The defense is looking pretty good. Caden Gooley is really solid. You know, I think you've got really good pieces, even if they're not perfect, in guys like Arbor Xhekaj, in Justin Barron, even Logan Mailloux, who had a really strong game in the AHL today after being sent down. I still don't know if he's necessarily part of the future, but he's putting up numbers and seeming to improve quite drastically, which is always a good thing for prospects. But I think the answer is kind of nuanced in that I don't think the Canadiens are trying to build the team that a lot of, like, experts and especially analytics focused people expect them to, because there's that idea of, like, this is the way that you build a team and this is the way that you can win a cup. And I think the Canadiens have kind of looked at it differently and thought, what's the way that we can build a team that has the most possible chances at a cup in a good stretch of time? And they looked at the Boston Bruins, in my opinion, and Jeff Gorton is the one who built a lot of that team. And they looked at how long they've been a competitive team, you know, basically 2010 until now. Even with Patrice Bergeron retiring last year, they were incredible. This year, they look strong again. And I think they're trying to build that Bergeron, Krejci, and then fill out the rest of the roster with, like, really strong players that have, like, specific roles. The same way that the Bruins did when they were building things with, and Suzuki is the Bergeron. And the question is more, who is the Krejci? Kirby Dach could be that guy. We haven't seen him elevate to that level yet and maintain health to be able to be that kind of guy. And also it necessitates some pretty strong players on your third and fourth lines to run a lineup like that, right? Because you don't have necessarily the top end offensive talent to get through. Owen Beck is a good option for the Canadiens. They've got some good depth organizationally. So it seems like a fit for them, but whether or not it'll work, who knows? It's never a guarantee, right?
Yeah, I mean, at least right now on paper, you guys have a legit top six, in my opinion. However, just speaking from a perspective of being a Sens fan over the years, I think right now, if I had to compare where you are, is where the Sens were 2 seasons ago in fall of 2022, right? There's a lot of hype coming out of the rebuild, per se. Back then, we added DeBrincat, we added Giroux, you added Line, you have Kirby Doc back full time. And of course, you have that top line Slavkovsky, Suzuki, and Caulfield, and they're all locked up, right? Like that entire top line has what, like 6 years left on their contract?
Yep.
With Slavkovsky with 9 more years, than Caulfield, I think, with 7. And all at very good cap hits, I will say. No one over $8 million, if I'm correct. And then you have, of course, Line coming in, secondary scoring. You have Kirby Doc, who looks good down the middle. I don't think he's the best face-off wise, if
No.
I'm not mistaken.
He's very bad at
But yeah, so sort of like a winger center sort of player. But he can play down the middle. He can, at least. Is he the most like the biggest natural fit for a center? In my opinion, no. But he can still sub in there. And then New Hook, of course, who I think still has some. He scored tonight, of course. He still has a little bit more potential, I think, to give as like a second line forward. And then you look on the back end, right? You have at least like Lane Hudson. Caden Gooley is going to be a very useful defenseman for the Habs going forward. Yes, he's not going to put up 50 points, I don't think. He has some offensive ability, of course. But tonight he had 8 block shots, right? This guy had 8 block shots for the Habs. And arguably, like other than maybe Montebo and maybe Hudson, was their best player on the ice, I think.
Yeah.
At least from the eye test. And of course, I will not leave out David Reinbacher. Now, I think there is some work to be done there, of course, but at least you have Lane Hudson, right? And
Yeah.
then, of course, sorry, I forgot about Demidov as well in the top 6. So, yeah, just, I know there's been some storylines for him over in the KHL right now, not getting a lot of minutes, and we'll see how that story develops over the year. But there is a lot to be desired in Montreal, and I'm not looking forward to it as a Sens fan. That is a terrifying building to go into. Just the good thing is that you were in the early years of the rebuild, or sorry, no, coming out of the rebuild, I'll say. But the thing is that I think for you guys, there's one more season. There's one more season of being in a good spot. A lot of the players, like, they're young and they're fun, and there's not really a ton of expectations. But once that next year comes around, if you don't start winning, you are in for a rude awakening. But that's okay.
Yes.
I'll give you the win tonight, of course.
Well, that's kind of the thing that I've been talking about a lot because I've been doing this show basically since the Canadiens started to be terrible. After that Stanley Cup run, we came in at the perfect time. But what I've been saying is it's kind of the perfect entry point as a fan because you don't have the stress of needing to win. You can just focus on like the fun stuff that happens and like the progress. And if there's progress being made, it's very easy to continue to be hyped up, even though you're losing 50 games a year. And when that gear change happens to where there's an expectation of winning, the fan experience gets way more stressful. I think Leafs fans have been living that. They saw the beginning with Nylander, Marner, Matthews, and the incredible excitement, and now it's all anxiety. So you got to have some sort of returns at some point, and the Senators are kind of at that spot now. The Canadiens are going to get there probably faster than we think, especially if this season continues going as it is. But hey, there's lots to be positive about with both these teams. I think that's the big takeaway is I think they're both going to be really strong teams for a good stretch here.
And it's unfortunate that they're both in the Atlantic, right? Like, is there a bad I know Buffalo's had a tough start, and I'll check their score tonight. I think they won. I'm
Oh,
pretty
good for
sure.
them.
Let's see here. I'm going to look on NHL.com. Yep, they came out with a 5-2 win over the Florida Panthers as well. So, this thing is, you can't say that there's really a bad team in the Atlantic. Everyone said that over the summer. If I had to place like a bet on who's going to be last, like I still think it's the Habs,
It
but
it
like we're
should
still
be.
super. Yeah, it should be, right?
Yeah,
But it's like that's a team that could easily be 500, easily be
easily.
500, be eighth in the division.
I think that's the weird thing about the Atlantic, right? Is like the Buffalo Sabres could be last this year. They
Go
could
ahead.
also make the playoffs. Like, I just don't know. The Ottawa Senators,
Hmm.
again, like if Ullmark plays this well and they put up like the underlying numbers that they've had for the last couple of seasons, which are pretty damn good, the Ottawa Senators could make the playoffs this year. The Tampa Bay
Yep.
Lightning could be really good. They could miss the playoffs very easily. I think they're on like the big downswing from their Stanley Cup heyday. The Detroit Red Wings, I feel like they're the most mid team in the entire NHL. They're just so
Yeah.
uninteresting to me. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be mean to the Red Wings, but like I don't know what the plan is there. It just doesn't work to me. It just seems like their goal
They're
is to be
trying to
okay.
make the playoffs.
Yeah.
They're trying to get any sort of, I know they're not like dying for money or anything, of course, but they're trying to get some fanfare in there when it comes to just simply getting into the final 16. That is all they care about. And like I've said this many times, like I don't think Dylan Larkin is like he's a great player, of course. Just I think he's a very high end second line center instead of first line center. But
Yes.
Detroit, yeah, um yes, they've added some free agents, and I think that's a good idea to not make sure that you rush your prospects. Um, Case in point, Buffalo, right? Where now they're putting like a guy like Benson in the top six, and he had a decent performance last year, but you just don't know if he can continue that, and you don't know if that's going to actually help him in his development, right? And so with Buffalo, I mean, I don't want to get too off topic here, of course, but there's been some like rumblings about an internal cap and stuff. And especially when you take a look at their attendance over the past couple of years, and I do not blame the fans whatsoever for not showing up. But yeah, it's funny because you have some teams kind of all over the place in the Atlantic, but you can argue for each and every one of them that they can make the playoffs
Yeah.
or at least be in the conversation.
Yeah, and the only ones that you like expect are definitely making the playoffs. Like there's, it can go up or down, but Toronto should make the playoffs. I assume Boston will make the playoffs. Florida, if they miss the playoffs, it would have to be one heck of a Stanley Cup hangover. And maybe that's what's happening in the beginning of the year here, but I don't expect it. I think that would be really shocking. But the Atlantic is a very tough division, and I think it's only going to get more difficult over the next couple of years before teams like Boston and Tampa really start to fall off, and maybe Toronto as well if they can't handle their cap issues. But it's a really exciting division. I think all the teams except for Detroit play pretty entertaining hockey, which is always fun to watch.